Thank you, Zorica. Just some few words after I have introduced our speakers to the audience. Karabournaki, or Little Karabournou, is located in North Aegean on the edge of the promontory in the center of the Thermaic Gulf in the area of modern Thessaloniki. The site preserves the remains of an ancient settlement, a harbor, and cemeteries flourished mostly in the Archaic and Classical times. The up-to-date findings are indicative for the commercial role of the site and its significance in the Aegean trade. The revealed architectural remains belong to residential buildings and storerooms dated mostly in the Archaic period, that is, 7th and 6th centuries BC. Thank you very much for accepting to give this lecture. And Lena and Despoina, the floor opens for you. Thank you.
Hello, I will start and then Lena will continue. First of all, we thank you for this kind invitation to participate in the ARVA lecture series. We are glad to be here today. The ancient settlement located in Karabournaki at the Thermaic Gulf is our topic today. And it's located in the Thermaic Gulf, an area that was characterized by extensive and continuous habitation during antiquity, long before the foundation of Thessaloniki. A significant number of settlements dated in prehistoric and historic times have been identified today along the coastal zone at the innermost part of the Thermaic Gulf within the city and the surrounding municipalities of Thessaloniki. Following the typical pattern in the area, that's from the early Iron Age until the Classical period, the settlements are found on artificial mounds that resemble log tables and vary in size. According to ancient written sources, one of the 26 small towns that participated in the foundation of Thessaloniki was Thermaic, which, due to its location, was of great importance for military and commercial reasons, as well as for the communication of the region with the rest of the Aegean. Thermaic is mentioned in ancient sources as early as the 6th century BC under this name, and played a role in various historical events, such as the Greco-Persian Wars or the Peloponnesian War. As it was located in a coastal area, had a safe natural harbor, and therefore was significant for movement and trade in the region. It is referred to as a settlement of Greek Thracians, and its Thracian name was Tinthe. According to Herodotus, Xerxes camped here with his fleet and army through his descent into southern Greece during the Persian Wars, and that's in the early 5th century BC. Moreover, Thucydides mentions that Thermaic was occupied by the Athenians during the Peloponnesian War. The ancient settlement connected with ancient Thermaic, particularly its harbor, is the subject of today's lecture and is located within the former Kodra military camp in the modern municipality of Kalamaria. Our goal today is to familiarize you with the archaeological site excavated by Aristotle University and to give you a glimpse of the findings as well as the organization of the settlement, the way of living, and the activities of its inhabitants. To understand the site, it must be noted that the main core of the ancient settlement is located on a low mound table. Although its extent is limited, its location indicates its role as a hub for maritime and land communication. It is situated on a small peninsula that extends to the Karabournaki Cape on the northeastern coast of the Thermaic Gulf and has visual contact with the mountain Hortiatis and the larger Cape Karabournou or Envolo in the area of Angelohori. A narrow ravine separates the mount from an elongated table, which likely also constituted part of the settlement. The cemetery extends at the foothills of the low mount. The settlement was coastal, but today it is somewhat detached from its natural harbor because the road connecting Thessaloniki with Nea Krini, the modern Plastira street you see on the screen, is dividing the mount into two parts, while its coastal section has long been submerged. Remains of harbor installations can be seen, however, in the water, both in the nearby marina and under the so-called Kivernio or Palataki. This wall, the seawall, is located about 100 meters from the current shore and extends to the Alatini Mills, providing a preview of the extent it covered in antiquity. But before we start talking about our excavation and its results, we should see briefly the history of the excavation research in the site. The archaeological research here has a long history that began more than a century ago, initially focusing on its necropolis due to military presence. It was during the First World War when the Allied European troops and that stationed here and discovered the first graves. The most systematic research was conducted by the well-organized archaeological service of the French Army of the East under the direction of the cartographer and officer Léon Rey. The French found several schist graves and sarcophagi dating to the late Archaic and Classical periods, which mainly contained weapons, jewelry, and imported vases. The results of their work were published by Rey in 3 consecutive issues of the Archaeological Journal Albania. The findings were transported to the Louvre Museum, where they are currently exhibited. Most of these artifacts were included in a major exhibition on ancient Macedonia organized at the Louvre a few years ago. At the same time, during World War I, the British, also members of the Allied Army, unearthed several graves. A few brief reports on their activities are provided by the archaeologist and war correspondent Casson in the annual of the British School at Athens, and some of the findings are in the British Museum. The discoveries made by the Russian soldiers of the Tsarist army, who were camped also in the area, have unfortunately been lost. All the mentioned findings come from the cemetery, which extends broadly at the foothills of the mountain. The first systematic, though very brief, excavation was conducted in June 1930 by Konstantinos Romeos, the first professor of classical archaeology at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. At that time, parts of the settlement were investigated for the first time, and layers of the classical period were uncovered. However, the continuous presence of the military on the site, combined with its use as a cemetery for horses of the cavalry, resulted in the disappearance of the more recent layers of the settlement and the disturbance of ancient trade. Further research with significant findings was also conducted by the late effort of antiquities Photios Petsas during the construction of the highway in front of the mount back in the 50s. From then until the 1990s, little was known, mainly due to random discoveries. Some of these, especially fragments of vases and other small objects, were found thanks to the zeal of then young archaeologist Konstantinos Tsakos, now honorary effort, and his brother Stamatis, who lived in Kalmaria. In 1994, the late effort Iulia Vokotopoulou invited Michalis Tiberios, professor of classical archaeology at that time, and now honorary professor and member of the Academy of Athens, to jointly undertake research on the site with the university conducting excavations in the settlement of the hill. Thus, Aristotle University returned to one of its earliest excavation sites, giving us the opportunity to systematically explore a relatively unknown period concerning pre-classical settlements in the Thermaic Gulf before the foundation of Thessaloniki by the Macedonian king Cassander in 316-315 BC. Alongside our team, during the first 2 excavation periods, archaeologists from the Archaeological Service excavated the settlement cemetery, where several dozen graves were found. Additionally, some of the graves originally discovered by the French soldiers were rediscovered. Among the findings from that research are pits containing large quantity of pottery fragments. Similar results were obtained from a rescue excavation in the area of the camp a few years ago, again by the Ephorate of Antiquities. A small section of an Iron Age cemetery was also uncovered at a short distance from the camp. However, as we have said, today's topic is the systematic university excavation of the ancient settlement at Karabournaki, which began in 1994 and has been conducted annually since then, serving as a field training ground for hundreds of archaeology students. Within this context, we will examine the architectural remains and the movable finds, as well as the insights we gain from them about understanding the settlement and its inhabitants. And we will start with the architectural remains, and then Eleni will continue with the pottery. The long-term university research at the ancient settlement has brought to light interesting details about this permanent installation at the innermost part of the Thermaic Gulf, which flourished mainly during the Archaic and Classical periods, but existed from the earliest historical centuries up to the Hellenistic era. As we see in the excavations topographical map, 112 trenches have been excavated so far at the top of the mound, most to a depth of only about 1.5 meters. In many trenches, we observed significant disturbances of the ancient layers due to modern military uses of the site, such as construction of pipelines, digging of trenches, as well as burials of horses, initially by the army and later by the Kalamaria Riding Club. Our frequent reports of wire, horse shows, and the skeletons of buried animals, which were very often found in most trenches, had become a trademark of our annual reports, at least during the first decade. Despite the extensive modern disturbance, several elements from the ancient settlement remain, allowing us to reconstruct parts of it and develop hypotheses about its form and organization. The excavation data to date suggests that the post-archaic phases of the settlement have been destroyed due to modern interventions, although earlier excavations and sporadic finds indicate its existence during the glacial period and even after the foundation of Thessaloniki. Our excavation aims to initially investigate the latest preserved phase of the settlement, and that's the reason that the depth of the trenches is generally limited. The horizontal excavation aims to initially investigate the layout of the settlement across the entire extent of the mound and then conduct deeper excavations for any earlier phases. Following this methodology, sections of the settlement dating primarily to the Archaic period have been uncovered. Belonging to the category of the unwalled settlements, like a commune, a town, a cluster, something fitting for ancient Thermi, which was probably a town of clusters, the settlement at Karabournaki was directly connected to its harbor. It is likely that the presence of the natural harbor, it was that led to the establishment of the settlement itself, which at least during the Archaic period had a permanent character. The architectural remains at the top of the mound include sections of buildings with northwest to southeast orientation. They had stone foundations with upper structures made of mud bricks, and their roofs were covered with tiles. In these residential areas, clay hearths used for preparing the food were found, and in some places were discovered stone pavements which served as courtyards or areas for various household activities. The findings in these spaces suggest they were houses, but also workshops, meeting the various needs of the settlement's inhabitants. The frequent presence of pithoi, meaning large storage jars, is notably found in various locations. Their role is storage, at least for cereals, as indicated by archaeobotanical data, although this does not exclude the storage of other products. The number of distribution of pithoi provide insights into the organization and economy of the settlement. For instance, storage areas are not centralized, but rather dispersed throughout the site with varying numbers of pithoi, which in some cases reach or exceed 10. Among them, trade amphoras are sometimes found. A distinctive feature of the settlement at Karabournaki is the beehive-shaped semi-subterranean constructions, dugouts, which are found throughout the mount surface. Based on current data, we assume that the earliest of these date back to the late 8th to early 7th century BC. All of them appear to follow a specific construction method, giving them this beehive shape in their underground part. The superstructure extended above ground with stones and bricks, and their diameter ranges from 1.5 to 2.5 meters. Some of these structures consist of two interconnected spaces through a small opening, such as the one you see on the screen. Although this type of construction is widespread in the broader area of the Thermaic Gulf, we do not know the original use in Karabournaki. However, from the context, it seems that they served storage, household, and workshop needs. In their final use, they became disposal areas, as indicated by their contents. Almost all the hypostcata contained significant quantities of pottery, mainly covering the well-known categories of local vessels and less so the various categories of imbos. This differentiation is indicative of the quantitative ratio generally observed between these two large categories of found ceramics. Obviously, after their initial use was discontinued, many dugouts were converted into disposal pits for various materials, not only pottery, but also small objects with room weights and spindle walls to be the most frequent, as well as organic remains such as seashells, animal bones, and seeds. Significant quantities of pottery, even complete vessels, were also found proportionately in various simple refuse pits, which also scattered throughout the settlement. A similar picture emerged from the excavation of other dugouts and refuse pits filled with pottery from the early Iron Age and the Archaic period, uncovered in various parts of the former Kovra camp through the research done by the Ephorian of Antiquities. Some of these unique constructions in the settlement, combined with metal working residues, primarily iron, were identified as spaces for metalworking activities, providing insights into specific aspects of the craft production that took place here. The facilities and residues of this workshop, which primarily manufactured iron and secondarily copper items and dates back to at least the 7th century BC, were found within the residential area in two neighboring trenches. Dugouts and pits, along with slag and pottery fragments that retain metal residues inside them, constitute the remain of the workshop, indicating its location and providing details about its operation and product. Various types of iron forging residues suggest the presence of more than one iron and bronze workshop in close proximity to each other. Notably, a cooking vessel with a large accumulation of slag inside, identified as a container for iron working use, came from this specific workshop. Specifically, analysis and studies indicate that the vessel was used for strengthening iron objects after forming. Besides its rarity as a find, being the only one known so far in Greece and the oldest known generally, The vessel size indicates the production of small metal items such as arrowheads, small spear tips, knives, pins, small tools, and others. Molds, you see some examples. Molds for the manufacture of jewelry or other metal decorative items were also found in various parts of the settlement. Currently, we have 4, 1 clay and 3 stone for different types of jewelry, probably bronze, such as double pins and pendants, but all 4 come from different trenches, something that confirms actually our hypothesis of multiple metalworking workshops. A very rare find includes 2 gold earrings, one found at the workshop along with an eye-shaped bead of blue glass, which cannot yet be associated with local metalworking. These findings collectively illustrate the complex and varied nature of the settlement's craft production, particularly in metalworking, highlighting the importance of Karabournaki as a significant center for industrial activities in the Archaic period. Apart from the production of metallic, the iron and copper objects, the architectural remains provide us with information about other activities of the inhabitants. Notably, the semi-subterranean beehive-shaped constructions, the poskapta, we said, are of particular interest. In one of these, remnants of a workshop for the production of egg-shell pottery was discovered. You will hear more about this type of pottery later on. Along with pieces of raw clay, unbaked, semi-finished, and fire-defective vessels, chemical analysis of the clay showed homogeneity and a common origin, indicating an on-site production. The presence of a waste pit suggests that the pottery workshop was nearby, likely on the mount itself. The excavation of the area where the ceramic waste was found did not reveal architectural remains, only pits and deposits. Based on current excavation data, the workshop seems to have been in an open area without buildings at the western edge of the settlement. This open space would have been necessary for the workshop's activities, including the accumulation of clay, its washing and drying, as well as the drying of the vessels after shaping, firing, and their storage until sale. Pottery workshops are often found near ports, roads, and markets, and the workshop at Karabournaki fits perfectly this pattern. The presence of this workshop production in the settlement appears to have lasted at least 2 centuries, during the 7th and 6th centuries BC, judging by the dating of the egg-shell pottery in general and the vessels found throughout the excavated area. Excuse me. The ceramic waste from the excavation indicates production from the 6th century BC. The large quantities of this pottery, combined with other finds, suggest that the production met the needs of the inhabitants as well as visitors, namely traders, buyers, etc., who came to Karabournaki to sell or buy goods arriving at the port. The discovery of egg-shell pottery in many neighboring and more distant settlements indicates the popularity and distribution of this category. It is noteworthy that the workshop remains found so far are within the residential horizon, albeit at its edges. The workshop areas appear to have been connected with the residential spaces, providing a comprehensive picture of the organization of settlements in the Thermaic Gulf area before the heyday of the Macedonian kingdom. And now Eleni will continue.
Hello, everybody. Another area of activity for the inhabitants must have been weaving, as indicated by numerous findings related to it, namely weaving weights, spindles, loom weights, spools, rounded and perforated sherds, discovered at various locations within the settlement. Although current data suggest it was a household craft, we cannot say for certain whether it exclusively met domestic needs or the broader needs of the settlement and its visitors, the merchants, sailors, and so on. There was evidently a great variety of textile products manufactured in the settlement, as suggested by the different types of weaving weights. We have conical, pyramidal, and disc-shaped, intended for making different fabrics. Woolen fabrics likely held a significant place in textile production, given that domesticated animals, that is sheep, provided the raw material, wool, which is well represented by numerous bones found in the settlement, as indicated by our archaeological remains. Some of the weaving tools were probably made in the settlement itself, just like other ceramic objects, for example, lamps and tiles, found scattered around. Turning now to ceramic production, especially earthenware, let us look at the main categories of pottery found at Karabournaki, which facilitates us better understand its formation, organization, and dating, as well as its commercial character. The movable finds, namely pottery sherds, are uncovered in all excavated areas of the ancient settlement, in particularly significant quantities. Undoubtedly, local pottery predominates quantitatively, while imported pottery also is present in considerable numbers, at least regarding certain categories. Additionally, other groups of movable finds and organic remains are studied and will be briefly presented below. The large quantities of pottery, including many types of vessels, highlight the significant role of the Karabournaki settlement and its harbor in the distribution of various products and clay vessels from other regions to the settlements of the Thermaic Gulf in particular and Central Macedonia in general. In this regard, the trade amphoras found in various locations, primarily in refuse pits, but also in storage areas along with the pithoi, are of particular importance. The diversity of transported goods is evident from the origin of these amphoras from most known production centers in southern and eastern Greece, and their use for transporting various liquid and solid products, such as wine, oil, legumes, nuts, salted fish, and others. Among the oldest are amphoras from Chios, Attica, and Corinth, while there are also ones from Samos, Miletus, Clazomenai, and later from Mende and other areas of the southern and northern Aegean. These amphoras originated from most, if not all, areas from which fine pottery is imported to Karabournaki. Particularly, during the Archaic period, the 7th and 6th centuries BC, it appears to have been a time of great prosperity for the settlement, with a strong presence of Greeks from eastern Greece, mainly Ionians, as well as merchants from various regions, including Caria and Phoenicia, as evidenced by relevant findings, among which are inscriptions bearing Carian names, indicating their commercial nature. In relation to the above observation about the prosperity of the settlement in the Archaic period, a distinct category of pottery vessels that were prevalent in Karabournaki during this period and belong to the utilitarian ceramics with a special cooking function can be mentioned here. These are clay grinding bowls used for grinding, melting, and mixing various raw materials, that is, as cereals, legumes, vegetables, spices, cheese, and honey, with the help of a pestle, in order to prepare various kinds of sauces, porridges, or purées. They often show signs of erosion on the interior, mostly on the bottom, while some bear joints indicating ancient repairs. They were therefore multi-purpose utensils in the ancient kitchen, like something today's mixers, But what is most interesting is that many of them reached Karabournaki from the southeastern Mediterranean, as it is confirmed that they were manufactured in Cyprus and the Syro-Palestinian coast, areas under Phoenician influence at that time. They thus represent a technologically advanced ceramic product that was exported to many other sites, as evidenced by relevant findings, mainly in the Near East, in North Africa, and Asia Minor. There are also a few samples known from the Black Sea, but now we have also Karabournaki that puts the Greek areas of Northern Aegean in this spot on the map. In Karabournaki, the number of these mortars is remarkable and remains under investigation how many similar vessels were found in other neighboring settlements where they might exist among the ceramic finds, but have not yet been recognized. So far, we recognized two fragments from Polychny and one from Thermaic, but there must exist others too. It is interesting that alongside them, several locally produced mortars have been found, typologically similar to the imported examples. Apart from the trade amphoras and the mortars, excavations in the settlement have brought to light many categories of imported fine pottery, dating mainly from the 9th to the 5th century BC, and originating from most regions of the ancient Greek world. These vessels were imported both to meet various needs as offerings, grave gifts, symposium vessels, and also for their contents, such as perfumes. The earliest fragments of imported vessels during the earlier historical times found in the excavated so far trenches of the settlement date back to the proto-geometric period and mainly its later phases and the sub-proto-geometric period. These include a small number of fragments, possibly from Euboea and Thessaly, as well as more of locally produced ones, such as commercial and table amphoras, fiale with pouring spot, with painted semicircles, and plain handmade vessels. The quantities of pottery seem to increase during the geometric period, especially in the second half of the 8th century BC. This is observed in both the Euboean imported vessels. There are mainly open vases, such as cups, craters, cantharoi, and also their imitations, some of which were apparently made in local workshops. Moving into the Archaic period, imports appear to increase further. It is interesting to note that a wide variety of groups from different regions of origin are represented, providing a representative picture of ceramic production from the major Greek workshops of the Archaic period. From the East Greek workshops, notable examples include bird bowls, Ionian cups, wild kotoinohoi and plates, Chian calices, Ionian and Aeolian bucero vessels, and some also rare shapes as the cauldrons, the lebetes, and some with figural scenes. Starting from the late 8th century, with some sporadic examples until now, the import of East Greek vessels is increasing in the 7th century BC, continuing into the 6th century BC. This pattern is common in the wider region and is not limited to the harbor and the settlement located in Karabournaki. This fine pottery appears to accompany the commercial amphoras, originating from East Greece, and is a common find in the entire excavated part of the ancient settlement from the mid-7th century onward. From the ceramic workshops now of Corinth, we have some few early Proto-Corinthian examples, as generally happens on the other also sites in the inland and the eastern side of the Thermaic Gulf, where is also Karabournaki. We have these few vessels, in contrast to the sites of the western side, where there were more, as in Methoni, Krania, Pieria, and so on. From the late 7th century BC, imports of Corinthian painted vessels increase, paralleling the presence of the so-called type A made in Corinth amphoras. throughout the 6th century and the first half of the 5th century BC, the shapes and iconography of Corinthian vessels unearthed at Karabournaki do not differ from those found in most settlements and their cemeteries in the wider area of Thessaloniki. A particular case may be the column craters, which are generally not so common finds, especially in settlements. The products now of the Attic Keramaikos first appear in the region with examples of the trade amphoras of the so-called SOS type, already from the mid-7th century BC, and much later also. In the first quarter of the 6th, we have some black figure pottery sherds. Except from a few column craters, amphoras, cups, and lecali in the mid-century, Attic painted pottery meets significant popularity only in the late Archaic period, and even then, through standard vessel shapes and specific workshops. Most of these, found at Karabournaki, have been located mainly also in the cemeteries of various neighboring and more distant settlements in central Macedonia, and mostly found in the cemeteries and significantly less in the residential areas. As mentioned earlier, the number of imported vessels in general is generally much smaller compared to the local ones, which have been identified at least from the Hellic historical periods, early Iron Age period, such as the imitations of Obean pottery mentioned earlier. At the same time, some new categories of local vessels emerge, combining elements from the local Macedonian tradition, especially in terms of shapes, with others from the common and widespread sub-protogeometric imported pottery, especially in terms of decoration. These categories include, indicatively, the amphoras and pithos amphoras of the type 2 of the North Aegean, with 2 and 4 handles also, respectively. Also vessels of the so-called silver-coated or silvery pottery, as well as those of the monochrome pottery with thick walls. It should be noted that these categories are encountered in most surveyed settlements along the coast and inland of the Thermaic Gulf, indicating communication and possible common dissemination networks from their production site to this region. The categories of local ceramics proliferate in the Archaic period. By this term, we mean all categories that were either certainly or possibly produced in Karabournaki, as well as those for which we have evidence that they were produced in neighboring settlements. Wheeled and wheel-made vessels predominate, for some categories of which we observe that they retain shapes of earlier categories, while simultaneously forming new technological, morphological, and decorative characteristics. This is evident, for example, in the case of vessels of the well-known and already mentioned eggshell pottery, in the case of groove vessels, or in those of large and medium-sized oinochoe, with either burnished body that you can see here, the so-called pumpkin oinochoe, and others often with band decoration or monochrome. Of interest is the coexistence of the above local categories with handmade coarse vessels, often characterized in the archaeological research as Thracian. The latter have a strong presence in Karabournaki, have usually cooking shapes, often show signs of firing, presumably due to their culinary use, and are found together with other groups of vessels dating to the Archaic period. Special mention should be made of the category of eggshell vessels that were undoubtedly manufactured in the workshop or workshops that existed in Karabournaki. These are tableware, relatively small or medium-sized vessels, suitable for serving and consuming liquids or solid foods and drinks. Other shapes of bigger format, such as amphorae, hydrie, or craters, don't exist. So we have only these kind of table vessels, and not the big ones for storage, preservation, and so on. The eggshell cups of the workshop stand out for their large quantity and variety in their dimensions. However, they all exhibit notable uniformity in their shape, with the main common characteristics being the absence of special formation on the lip and the flat base. The one-handled basin-shaped fiale, with or without a spot, are the second most common shape of this workshop. They resemble the footless cups in general shape. Some feature a tubular spout diametrically opposite to the single handle. Consistent with the long-standing tradition of Macedonian ceramic workshops is the variety of the eggshell, oinochoe, pitchers, and olpe found in the site. The cutaway shape of the lip is very characteristic, while the trefoil mouth is not so common. These closed vessels of eggshell pottery are characterized by somewhat compressed proportions, with a short neck, spherical body, flat base, and handle of ribbon whose weight doesn't exceed the lip of the vessel. A fascinating discovery was an intact ladle for pouring liquids from other larger vessels. As for their decoration, these vessels found in the site present a uniform picture, I mean the eggshell pottery, as they are covered with a red or brownish coating with a relatively thin consistency but a glossy appearance. In some of them, the coating has been applied in a careless manner and brush marks are distinctly visible. Regarding now the other finds, oil lamps stand out, with the samples found so far numbering around 400. These lamps, both local and imported, vary in their preservation condition and chronologically range from the Archaic down to the Roman times. Other non-ceramic finds include an Egyptian scarab, a piece of a decorated silver-plated band of a shield, and a silver tetragramon dated to the mid-5th century during the reign of the Macedonian king Perdiccas II. And this is the only coin found so far within the entire excavation. Stone objects, clay figurines, jewelry, metal artifacts, and also architectonical terracottas, very few, complete the picture of a rich and prosperous settlement. Now we can say some words for the zooarchaeological and archaeobotanical remains that show a considerable variety, and their study so far has provided important evidence and information, which we can summarize here. The examination of animal bones is still in early stage. However, initial observations indicate that the bones are in very good preservation condition, with a wide representation of anatomical zones and ages of domesticated animals, such as sheep, goats, cows, pigs, dogs, as well as game animals, such as the deer and wild boars. On the surface of several bones, intense pre-depositional processing marks have been observed, such as the cut and burn marks, as well as post-depositional ones, such as bite marks, while the remains of the processing of deer antlers that you can see here are also of interest. The shellfish, according to initial observations, impress not only with their large quantities, but also with the variety of the species found. Specifically, rare species from the Cardiaceae family have been found, as well as other more common and well-known in the Thermaic Gulf, such as mussels, scallops, cones, whelks, cowries, tubes, oysters, limpets, and even cuttlefish. The systematic collection and exploitation of shellfish are clear and evident, with their primary position in the diet of the settlement's inhabitant. Apart from their dietary importance, the practical use of some shellfish for the manufacture of objects, such as lamps, spoons, jewelry, is also apparent. A wide range of fishing, although we have fewer preserved samples, is evidenced by the fish bones, indicating a great variety in fishing methods and fishing zones, even in open seas. The study now of archaeobotanological remains has also provided interesting insights. Most of the studied archaeobotanical assemblages come from pits and hyposcapta, yielding 24 species of cultivated grains, legumes, and fruits, and as well 159 wild plant species. The composition of the samples is particularly diverse, with a remarkable variety of different plant parts. For example, many samples contain over 30 plant parts, some even reaching 50, excluding the wild species. Notably, grape stems, seeds, and individual grape skins, byproducts of winemaking, are present in mixed samples. The evidence, combined with the presence of type 2 amphoras from the Northern Aegean, suggests the possibility of wine production in Karabournaki or in the Thermaic area. Therefore, these specific amphoras may have been used for transporting this local wine, indicating the settlement's role as a production and bottling location within the region's economic network. We come now to a conclusion after all that you heard. When it comes to pinpointing the location of ancient thermae, there are several candidates in the region, such as the present-day historical center of Thessaloniki or the city district of Anotumba. However, ample evidence suggests that the site of Karabournaki was the most neuralgic part of this settlement, which comprised several small communities. Additionally, insights from the Roman scholar Pliny the Elder indicate that during his time, both the older Thermae and the newer Thessalonica coexisted, making it unlikely that the new city was established precisely atop the earlier settlement, which would have occupied a different location nearby. Essential to our suggestion is also the information you heard at the beginning, coming from Herodotus, that the city of Thermae boasted the only harbor in the region. Even the Persian king Xerxes brought his fleet and army there and stationed before advancing to southern Greece in 480 BC. The most suitable location for such a harbor would be the promontory of Karabournaki, with its two natural ports, one in the north offering protection from southerly winds and the other in the south, sheltered from the north winds. Today, remnants of an ancient mall can still be observed in the sea directly beneath the hill where our settlement is located. Of significance is also the information that you also already heard from Thucydides about the temporary occupation of Thermae by the Athenians at the beginning of the Peloponnesian War. This is consistent with an important find unearthed in the cemetery of the site, that is a bronze hydria, bearing the following incised inscription on the rim: "The Athenians from the funeral games of the war," referring here to an athletic competition in honor of deceased during the Persian Wars. This valuable vessel was probably owned by an Athenian officer who was a member of the occupying army that had settled in Thermae at that time, that is, the second half, last quarter of the 5th century BC. Through this brief presentation, we attempt to provide an overview of the form and organization of the ancient settlement at Karabournaki. We focused on issues of production and trade through various findings, aiming to outline certain aspects of life in the ancient settlement, which served as a primary and significant port on the Thermaic Gulf, facilitating communication with the rest of the Aegean while being directly connected to the surrounding area and its environment. In conclusion, only to show you, more information about our archaeological research at Karabournaki can be found on the excavations website. Thank you very much for your interest and attention.